Good afternoon and welcome to the Humanities Program Academic Breakout Session Virtual Celebration 2020. We're very happy to have you with us virtually. This afternoon I am happy to acknowledge and to introduce two professors in our different programs under the Humanities Program. Dr. John McBratney, Professor of English, and Dr. Malia McAndrew, Professor of History. So right now I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Dr. McAndrew and enjoy the session.
Hi everybody, thanks for joining us online today. My colleague and I are going to talk to you a little bit about what it would mean to be a humanities major or minor at John Carroll University. As you already know, we offer a lot of different programs. So you could study art history, Asian studies, classical or a modern language. We have English, history, philosophy, theology and religious studies. All of these fields fall under the grouping that we call the humanities. And so in today's society, a lot of fields get attention, right? Because all fields are important. But sometimes we are the undersung heroes of the academic university. I think Dr. McBratney and I would argue that our fields have special things to teach potential college students, which we'd like to highlight so that you might consider studying the humanities at John Carroll. So one of the first questions, one of the inevitable questions that many humanities majors get is the age-old, well, what are you going to do with that, right? What are you going to do with a history major? What are you going to do with an English major? And so many of you might be thinking these questions in your own head as well. Maybe you're drawn to philosophy, or maybe you're drawn to art history, but you have these questions in your head like, you know, what will I do with this major? Am I going to find a job? What career could this lead to? And am I going to love that profession? So just to start briefly, if we look at the data that's out there in that world of higher education today, and we ask employers, what are the essential skills that you want your employees to know? What is it important for on day one, your employees to be able to do? That what these employers say is the things that they want employees to be able to do are critical thinking and problem solving skills. They want people to have oral communication skills, written communication skills. They want them to have a multicultural fluency. And these are all the types of things that our humanities courses at John Carroll think about a lot, talk about a lot, reinforce a lot in the classroom. So as humanities professors, I'm not only responsible for teaching history. Dr. McBratney is not only responsible for teaching English, but part of learning English, part of learning philosophy, part of learning history is learning to be a critical thinker, is learning to how to work together in teams, look at things from different perspectives, to hone in on our oral presentation and our written presentation skills. So those are things that we're going to be doing in all of our classes, regardless of which humanities discipline you might pick. So certainly, as I've just said, the humanities will prepare us for our future careers, but I want to go a level deeper than that, because going back to that question of, you know, what are you going to do with that major? You know, as a historian or a philosopher or a theology and religious studies scholar, you know, we don't build bridges, we don't deliver babies. So what possible good could we have for society? Well, I think many of us in these fields would give a wholehearted response for the many things that we think that our disciplines can help with in the world today, and that our students will come out prepared to think about. So the first thing that I would point to is that the humanities help us to understand change and how the societies that we live in today came to be, as well as how we might want to think about shaping them for the future, right? So if you take any social problem, any social phenomena that's going on, so let's say low voter turnout, right? Well, if Americans are voting at low numbers today, how did it get to be that way? What was it like in the past? What things happened in the past that made it be a lower rate of interaction than it had been previously? Were there economic factors that affected this? Were there social factors that affected this, right? And then taking our knowledge of what caused this situation in the past, how might we look to the future? What types of things might we want to do in the future to change this situation and to get higher voter registration rates in the United States. So these are all the types of skills that, that thinking from this humanities mindset is going to help us develop. Another thing that the humanities are going to do, especially at a school like John Carroll, a Jesuit Catholic institution, is it's going to help contribute to our moral understanding and to develop our moral imagination. So at John Carroll, we often say that we want to be men and women for others and with others. You know, but what does that physically mean in the practical sense? The humanities give us the space and the time to start thinking about many of these very tricky moral questions that our society has to deal with. So, you know, even in our recent situation in dealing with the shortage of ventilators in the United States, if two people need a ventilator and there's only one ventilator, how do you decide who should get that piece of equipment? I mean, that is a moral question, that is an ethical question. And those are the types of things that you're going to be grappling with in a moral theology class, in a philosophy class. These are the courses that help you to ask the big questions, right? In our society, many times we don't have time to in our daily lives to think about large questions. And these classes in the humanities make us sit down and make us think about these questions that we as a society so desperately need to grapple with. The humanities also help us to understand people and societies. So especially looking at our foreign language classes, at our international business and culture offerings, you know, people in other places and other cultures, they do things differently. And as much as I love my lifestyle and I think everything I do is right, I have a lot to learn from the rest of the world. And when you think about everything, from the way we eat, the way we drink, the way we marry, the way we travel, all of the types of things that we do, when you go to different cultures, you explore different patterns of thought, you explore different ways of thinking. And that really opens your imagination to the possibilities of the world. You know, just as one specific example, I was lucky enough to accompany a group of John Carroll students to Japan on their study tour. And one of the things that amazed me is when I want to go from one city to another city in the United States, I just jump in my car and I go. Or maybe if it's far enough away, I'll take a plane. But in Japan, everywhere we went on the bullet trains, on the Shinkansen. And one of the things that I was amazed with is when I get on a train in the United States, or a subway car, more likely, it's like mass humanity getting on and getting off. And in Japan, people just queue up nicely in line, right in order. And it's a very orderly process of getting from one place to another. So that made me think a lot about, you know, how we interact with each other in public space in the United States versus how we interact with one another in public space in other cultures. And so just the opportunity to be outside of your home culture and to think about and to grapple with other cultures and the way in which other peoples of the world do things now, have done things in the past, is something that many of our humanities classes are going to focus on, right? The humanities, another kind of selling point of the humanities is that the humanities help us to understand ourselves. And as I've said before, you know, we are not the first people on earth to think about questions like, who am I? Why am I on this earth? Why am I meant to be here? But we can enter into a conversation in our humanities disciplines with other scholars who have thought about these types of things. So, you know, what does Plato have to say about that? What does Socrates have to say about that? What does Mary Wollstonecraft have to say about that? These great philosophers of the past, how are they helping to understand issues of identity and the place of humans and the role of humans on this earth? Even through, you know, through great art or through great literature, we can get a sense of who we are and who we want to be as an individual and as a society as well. I know, just on a personal note, one of my favorite books of all time is a book by an author by the name of Jose Saragamo, who wrote this book called Blindness. And the book is about a virus that leads to a global pandemic that causes blindness in society. And so I'm so grateful to have read that because it just made me think about issues surrounding what's going on now in our society. And he was helping me to think about it even before I knew that I needed to think about it, and putting these ideas into my head to help us grapple with these large issues and ideas in society. So Another reason that I would argue that we should study the humanities is it gives us models for good citizenship, right? So in a democracy, it requires us to participate in our governance. It requires us to participate in the shaping of our government. And the humanities provide us with that model for good citizenship. In my own history class earlier today, we had a debate about civil liberties. So during times of national crisis, to what extent should the government limit civil liberties? The ability to assemble, the ability to speak freely within society, the rights of a free press. And so we talked about civil liberties, how the government forbade criticism of the government during World War I. We talked about the incarceration of 120,000 Japanese Americans during World War II. And we were using that to think about, you know, what are the limits on our own freedom today, and what should be the limits on our own freedom today in society. So all of these reasons that I've given you are reasons why we want to study the humanities. But the last one I'm going to give you is probably the one that I actually think is the most true answer. You know, we should study the humanities because we love them, because we enjoy them. And anytime you love something, you enjoy something, you put your heart into it. I mean, I'm going to argue that only good things are going to come out of it. Your undergraduate educational experience is a time for you to learn and to grow. And if you are interested in art history, in philosophy, in English, in any of the humanities disciplines, we would love to learn and grow with you over the next 4 years. So thank you very much for your attention. I am now going to turn it over to my colleague, John McBratney, who's going to talk a little bit more about the specifics of our programs and some things that they have to offer.
Hello, again, I am John McBratney, and I teach English. I've been at John Carroll for over 30 years, and I want to welcome you to our session, and hope that we can inform you as you wish to be informed, and answer questions that you might have in the second half of this program. Hello, I'm John McBratney. I teach English. I've been at John Carroll for about 30 years. I want to welcome you. I hope that we can tell you a lot about the humanity that is useful for you, and I hope that in the second half of this program we can answer your questions about the humanities. Next, please. All right. How is it that the humanities work? What makes them tick? Next, please. There are several components that enter into how humanities work. One is that we're always exploring new pedagogies. We're also using path-breaking teaching techniques, and we're also exploring opportunities for students to learn outside of the classroom, to engage in what's called experiential learning. Next, please. So one of the inevitable questions that you have probably already asked before coming to this session is precisely this one here: what do our grads do? And one undergraduate I had the pleasure to work with some years ago had an answer for this question, and that was, what can the humanities do, or what can humanities students do? And she said, they can do anything. They're very versatile, and the list of fields here gives you some indication of how versatile those humanities majors can be. Health, law, business, government, diplomacy, teaching, nonprofit organizations. We could go on and on. Next, please. So from this point on, what I'm going to be doing is showing you a series of slides that each of the departments in the humanities has contributed to this session. Now, I'm assuming that most of the people in the audience are going to be watching and listening at the same time. You'll have video and audio, but I realize that some of you may only have audio. If that's the case, you're welcome to listen along, but you're going to miss part of the program, the visual portion. If you would like to listen and then afterwards see the full recording while you're listening, there is going to be a recorded version of this session that you'll be able to upload and partake in. So the Department of History is the first department we're going to look at, and I'm not going to read all of these slides. Some of the slides are a little text heavy, and I'm just going to give you an opportunity, those who can see the screen, to read the text on your own, and then I'll comment now and then. I'm probably going to have to move fairly quickly because we've got lots of slides, and I want to make sure that you all have plenty of time to ask questions. Next, please. So why history? I'll let you read. Dr. McAndrew has already talked about some of the skills that are listed in bullet number 2. Just want to say a little something about bullet number 3. Professors contribute actively to scholarly debates and use innovative teaching methods. The philosophy here at John Carroll is that scholarship and teaching go together. They feed off of each other. So as a scholar, I investigate a particular area. That makes me all the more informed, all the more curious about the subject matter I'm going to teach. Often I've taught something, that teaching sparks an idea that I can then use in my scholarship. So there's a constant interchange between those two. And I think leads to our being not just better scholars, but better teachers in the classroom. Next, please. One of the features of our education here at John Carroll that's going to recur in these slides is the idea of studying abroad or going on what's called an immersion experience, a short-term service or learning experience abroad. History is one of the leaders in this respect, and I'll let you just get a sense of the geographical span of the kind of study guide tours or study tours that history professors have taken their students on. The slide on your left is a picture of the Colosseum in Rome, and the picture on your right is a shot of the Brandenburg Gate in Berlin. Next, please. Now we come to Asian Studies, and here we have a group of students at the Great Wall. Next, please. And I'll let you read. One of the features of Asian studies, along with classical and modern languages, is that students in those majors are required to study more language than the average John Carroll student would. Usually 2 courses worth of extra language preparation. But it's all to the good for those who are majoring in Asian studies. Next, please. We wanted to give you some idea of how important Asia is economically, and I'll let you look at this chart. It's rather remarkable how strong those economies are. We may not think, for example, that South Korea has a mighty economy, but it's at number 12, and that's the last of the 4 Asian economies represented here. Next, please. Asian countries are also important trading partners of ours. I'll let you read. And we're moving on now to a shot from a study tour in Japan. You probably know that tea is very important in the Japanese culture, and the preparation and drinking of tea is a very ceremonial occasion. These students are learning the first steps in how to perform that ceremony properly. Next, please. Malia, we've lost you. Oops. Okay. And here we are at another study tour site. This was the tour of the Silk Road, that is that ancient road that ran from China to southern Europe. Marco Polo went along that Silk Route or Silk Road. And these students are at Lebrang Nunnery, which is a very important center of Tibetan spiritual and cultural characteristics. Next slide, thanks. Okay, we come to my department, the Department of English, and we have a motto from our chair. Everybody's talking about narrative these days. You've got to have the right narrative, or there's a counter narrative or an alternative narrative. Well, this motto shows the importance of story or narrative, something that we study a lot in the English department. Next, please. There are 3 tracks in the major: the literature track, the creative writing track, and the professional writing track. The literature track is the traditional track. It mainly involves studying and writing about imaginative literature from Beowulf to Virginia Woolf. Creative writing is a newer track. This is the track for budding creative writers, whether they be poets, fiction writers, or nonfiction writers. And finally, the latest addition to our assembly of tracks, the professional writing track, which teaches students how to do writing in a technical or business environment. Next, please. Our faculty are excellent teachers. They're distinguished, and we have a history of winning to prove it. Among the departments at John Carroll, the English department has won the most distinguished faculty awards and Lucrezia Colichia awards. These are the top awards within all-round performance. That's the Distinguished Faculty Award, and the Colichia Award, the Teaching Award. We also have in our midst, just this year, a Guggenheim Fellow. There are only 175 of these in the US this year, and one of them teaches in our department. And finally, we have a faculty member who was a Fulbright Scholar in Spain in 1991. Next, please. What do our students learn to do? Well, they learn to read sensitively. In other words, they learn to read with respect and appreciation for the nuance of language in many different forms. They also learn how to make compelling arguments about literature. This is what writers in the traditional literature track mainly do. Write interpretations of the literature that they read in their literature classes. But students also learn to compose sonnets and fire off micro-stories. These are students in the creative writing track. They dabble in the most traditional of literary forms, the sonnet, but they also try their hand at the latest cutting edge contemporary genres also, the micro-story. And then those in the professional writing track will sometimes write technical documentation. Anyone in the business world or in the IT world knows that documentation is extremely important. And finally, what we do in general is do interesting things with words. Next, please. We spend a lot of time being quiet and just reading. So we say shh to ourselves often, but we also have fun not being quiet in our classes. We have very vigorous discussion. The English Club, student publications, the John Carroll Review, volunteer service in many different venues, the Writing Center, the Young Writers Workshop, which is for high school students who are interested in being writers, our Northern Ireland trip, and finally our interactions with visiting writers, of whom we have many distinguished representatives. Next slide, please. But English majors also do things outside of the classroom. They do internships, that's required in the professional writing track, and they do other extracurricular activities also. And this screen just gives you a couple of examples of those extracurricular activities. The one on the left is a creative writing project for residents of a juvenile detention facility. And then on your right, we have a class tour of the Great Lakes Brewing Company that was started and is owned by a former English alum at John Carroll. And this particular class was looking at ways in how a business like this brewery can create a sustainable market. Next, please. Now we move to classical and modern languages and cultures. On the left, we have an on-campus event, a group of dancers dancing, not sure which nationality that is, but in very colorful costumes. And then on your right, we have a study tour group, I think somewhere in the Mediterranean. I'm not sure what that locale is. Next, please. There are several majors and minors within the Department of Classical and Modern Languages and Cultures. Classics, that's Greek and Latin. French, German is minor only. It used to be a major, but it's just a minor at this point. Italian, you design your own major, and the most popular major within the department, Spanish. And then there are a couple of programs outside of classical and modern languages and cultures that tap into the expertise of instructors within the department. So Asian studies, remember it has an extra language component. They pick up that language component within course offerings in this department. And then international business in the business school has a program in which students go abroad to intern or work. They also need enhanced language skills, and so have to take classes within the Classical and Modern Languages and Cultures department. Next slide, please. Many students within Classical and Modern Languages journey beyond the classroom. They can be interns. They can do something very specialized, work on a summer archaeological dig, probably in the Mediterranean. They can use their language skills in study abroad. They can be quite fluent if they stay for a year abroad, for example. Or they can do a short-term immersion experience, often combined with service, that draws on their language skills. And finally, they can do work at home. They can serve in a bilingual capacity within the Cleveland community. Next, please. And here we're going to look at a series of slides that feature alums of this department. And what I'd like you to look at, I'm not going to say very much about each one, but what I'd like you to look at is just the combination of majors. This is very common at John Carroll. Students don't just specialize in one area. They often will have a major and then another major, or a major and a minor, or a major and two minors. Here's an example of a gentleman who majored in classics and economics and went on to law school and is now a lawyer. All right. Next slide, please. And here we have somebody who does something more traditional within the Classical and Modern Languages department. You know, after graduating, he decided he foreign languages, and that's what he's doing now. Next slide, please. Next. Melissa? Thank you. Oh, we can't forget Anne Cecilia Byrne. She's going to be one of the students who'll be answering some of your questions later. And just again, look at the combination of major and minor majors and minors that she did at John Carroll. And notice she also did study abroad in 2 countries and is now attending graduate school. Next, please. And then finally to Gino Veniti, who has a very broad interest in various academic subjects, Spanish, chemistry, and leadership, studied abroad, did some clinical work in Peru, and now is in dental school, or bound for dental school. Next, please. We come to our history now. Next, please. I'll let you read this. Why major in art history? A couple of things are important here. Art history is emphatically integrative. That means that It combines 2 or more disciplines in the kind of work that students are required to do. This idea of integration is very important within the core, but it's also important in a lot of different departments. It's important here, it's important in English, it's important, I could go on and on. Probably every department within the humanities is interdisciplinary, or at least multidisciplinary in some way, very integrative. The other thing that I would mention is that art history, like a lot of other humanities departments, draws on both sides of your brain. If you believe in the science that, you know, certain parts of the brain are responsible for certain kind of intellectual and affective aspects of our lives, this department is excellent at combining the analytical and creative. Next, please. There are lots of opportunities for art history majors and for students who take art history courses outside of the classroom, and I'll let you just read this. I want to fix on something in that last sentence. Art history let your passion create the foundation of your career. Most instructors in humanities believe in this idea wholeheartedly. You need to pursue your passion. You need to go with your gut. Do what you love and the money will follow. Next slide, please. I'll let you read this one. Where do our alums go after John Carroll? Again, there are a range of options from graduate school to working within museums or galleries to going into various sectors of the economy open to graduates of art history. Next, please. And then finally, the Department of Philosophy. We see Socrates on the left and then a diligent student, perhaps studying Socrates, writing notes. Next, please. I'll let you read this. There's a lot of emerging literature in the field of economics, which argues that in the future, in the not too distant future, the students, the college students who are going to be best placed to draw upon the opportunities in the job world are going to be humanities majors, because increasingly human skills, or what are sometimes called soft skills, the ability to communicate, the ability to collaborate with others, the ability to cross disciplinary lines and to integrate disparate bodies of knowledge. This is what humanities majors, regardless of department, learn. Those are the skills that are going to be important in the future as we innovate increasingly. Even accountancy, I hear, may be automated at some point. Well, we're still going to need people who can talk to one another and write to one another well. And for that reason, humanities majors will always have a place in the job world. But I think another thing that's really important in this slide too is the ability to just learn, the propensity to learn. One of the mottos when I was at college was, what college teaches is the ability to learn. You learn how to learn. That's what humanities majors do, I think, as well as any student at John Carroll. They have the flexibility and adaptability to learn just about anything. Next, please. And then this is true of philosophy, but it's true of all of the departments within humanities. And that is, yes, it's important to study the humanities to get a good job. We have to be practical. But the humanities are important in making us good citizens and also allowing ourselves to become fulfilled individuals. And just take a look at what we have here. One of the speakers who came to John Carroll a couple of years ago said something very interesting, and that is, he said, what's great about the humanities is that when you get older, your own mind is an interesting place to inhabit. In these times of the coronavirus, when a lot of us are inside with a lot of, well, for some people, a lot of time on their hands, I think people tend to become introspective. If you can be introspective and inhabit a mind that is filled with the kind of discipline and the kind of knowledge that humanities inculcate in students, you're going to be a happier person. You're going to be more fulfilled. Next, please. And here we have a description of the faculty in the Department of Philosophy. I'll let you read this. Next, please. And then there's some more information here about tracks within the philosophy major. I'll let you just read this. Philosophy is an extremely popular major when it comes to minors. If you're majoring in chemistry, but you're interested in thinking about big things, big questions, philosophy is the major for you. Next, please. And now we're going to close with some thoughts, some general thoughts about the humanities, and I'm going to turn the microphone, so to speak, over to Dr. McAndrew, who will begin this closing session.
So thank you again for joining us today at John Carroll University. I would be happy to talk to anybody interested in the humanities about any of our particular programs, and I look forward to seeing you in the fall. Thanks so much.
And I would say the same thing. You know, we have our email addresses here. If you want to jot them down and shoot us a question based on this recording, that's fine. Or if you just have another question, not necessarily about history or about English, but about the humanities, just send it our way. And if it's a question that we can ask, or answer rather, we'll answer it for you. If it's not a question we can answer, if it's outside of our bailiwick, we'll send it on to the person or the department that could best help you. So again, it was a pleasure addressing you. I hope you got a lot out of this. Hope you remain interested in John Carroll. I hope you come. It'd be great to see you in the classroom. And I think that concludes it. Thank you.
All right, great. Thank you very much, Dr. McAndrew and Dr. McBratney. For those in the audience, I think that you got a very strong sense of the fact that we really engage the whole person in the classroom, and we really try to create lifelong and curious learners here at John Carroll with skills that are essential not only for graduating, but when they go on and get grad school or careers. So thank you for joining us today. We are going to be moving on to our Q&A session. So hopefully you have some great questions to ask of our panel. Thank you very much.